KZ Guy 2 here, No Nonsense Know-How. Today working on a 2006 Honda CR-V. It's got 106,000 miles on it, 2.4 liter. And we've got two codes, the, if you can see that, P1078 and P1077. That's gonna be for your intake manifold runner control system. So I just wanted to go over some basic diagnostics on this. I'm going to show you guys how to remove it and check it out and replace it, ideally, if you have to. All right, jumping ahead here, I will show you how to remove all this stuff, but I just want to go over how the system works and what some of the most common problems are going to be. What the system is has this rotary valve in here that effectively adjusts the length of these runners, these intake runners, so to increase low RPM power or high RPM power, essentially. So how the system works, it has a vacuum supply going to the bottom of this switching valve right here, this vacuum switching valve from the intake. That's right here. So make sure that hose doesn't have any cracks or problems on it. Now the connector going to it, it's going to be right here, and two-wire connector. When you turn your key on, you'll have 12 volts positive on this red-blue wire, and the black-yellow wire, when the key's on, engine off, that should be grounded. So when you plug this in and out, you should actually hear that solenoid clicking, which would be your opportunity to put a vacuum hose on here and make sure this valve is indeed opening and closing and sealing properly, because that would be a common failure as well. That, you know, not the most common failure. The most common failure is that this valve actually gets all gummed up, but that could be a failure point as well. So check out your solenoid. Obviously the hose coming from the solenoid up to here to the diaphragm, make sure that hose is hooked up in good shape. Put your vacuum gauge on here and make sure this diaphragm holds vacuum and doesn't leak. And then of course when you get it off, make sure that, or have a scan tool hooked up to it, but make sure, you know, when you apply vacuum that it's actually turning this rotary valve, and that's working. So, and of course another failure point could be the actual rotary valve position sensor on the back here, mounted on the back. That could be bad, intermittently faulty even, and the wires going to that could be chafed up. So, you know, obviously, when you turn the key on, engine off on this connector, if you're getting that ground, that means that the computer does have the ability to ground the circuit. So that's a quick test on that. That means the wiring going back to the computer is going to be, you know, assumed to be good. Anyway, so your most common failure is going to be that this gets all gummed up and sludged up. So you got to clean this. You got to clean out the inside real good. As you can see, I've already cleaned this one out. And yeah, those are going to be mainly what you're looking at. So anyway, start with these two 10mm bolts on this. Get this cover out of your way here. Disconnect the battery. Go ahead and, looks like we're going to have to take this off to get clearance to get this intake off. So you got a bunch of 10mm holding that on, a whole pile of them. You're going to have to get the harness off of it, a bunch of those, one inside of here as well. You know, try not to break those, pop those off using a pocket screwdriver, and two more 10mm here. So the tricky one is going to be on the bottom. There's actually one 10mm, and you got to get it from the bottom of the car. So that's a little tricky to get to. You don't have to remove this though. So once you get all that off, there's also some wire connectors going down. You know, you got to make sure to get these off without breaking them as well. A little tricky to do, but once you get that. All right, so we have this piece out of our way here. Go ahead and remove these two 10mm clamps here, loosen those up. Got a hose on the bottom, connection right here. Get that hose out of your way. We're gonna leave the, we're gonna remove the body from the manifold because you got cooling lines on the bottom and such too, and just leave all these connections on. So remove those 4 10mm nuts, looks like two nuts and 2 bolts. Then go ahead and remove your 5 12mm nuts and bolts on your intake manifold. Now there's nothing on the bottom actually securing this on, so now we got it nice and loose. On this side you're going to have this hose, the hose going to the bottom of the solenoid right here, and this electrical connection right here going to the valve itself. And once you get all that, boom, it just slides right out of place. Alright, so with this off, you're going to want to make sure your intake manifold gasket's in good shape, or just replace that. And then remove these 3 10mm bolts holding this on. You don't have to remove the one back here. And then you can just grab this thing and slide it right out like that. And yeah, now visually look it over. I already checked this one out. I don't see any cracks or problems with it, but basically what this thing does is adjust the length of the runners in there by spinning. So you know, you can see all this sludge build up here in here and all this goo right here too. And so basically what happens when it gets really cold out is, it's been like, you know, 5 degrees in the morning, that stuff gets real real sticky, and it causes this valve to get stuck open and closed. So you know, clean this thing out real good and go ahead and put it back in. You know, you could replace it if you wanted to, but this one doesn't seem like it needs to be replaced. You know, the diaphragm's holding vacuum and all that, so that's all good. Anyway, so I'm gonna get this cleaned out, put it back together, clear out the code, and we'll be good. So, but just to show you this thing, right now we have full vacuum applied. You can see it's at 3.84 volts. Then I'll release the vacuum. You can see it spun down and it dropped down to 0.98. And you know, make sure to check the O-ring on the end here and everything. Just make sure everything's in good shape and no cracks or broken pieces anywhere. And just to note here, once you get this all cleaned up and get the gunk out of there, inspect the sides for any deep burrs or scratches, something that would affect operation, and go ahead and sand those out. And assembly tip here, when you're putting this back on, make sure to lubricate the big O-ring on this side, and then when you push this down and you line the bolt holes up, you're going to notice you actually can't push it all the way down. Do not bolt it down and force it down. Either apply vacuum to this hose or go ahead and apply some pressure there and then spin it back a little bit, and you'll see then it pushes down, and then spin it back to the location to line the bolt holes up. If you go ahead and force it down, you're gonna end up breaking something. So once you bolt it down, apply vacuum to it, stick your finger in the intake runner, and feel for the operation of this thing. Make sure it's actually working before you go bolting this back on. So anyway, putting it back together, guys, is pretty simple. So you know, hopefully you can figure that out. And to verify operation driving around, we can see sitting here in park, it does have that solenoid grounded and it's closed. So now going to accelerate. We'll see just before a gear switch, that high RPM power is going to open up and then close when it shifts gears. So we can see our values are accurate there, working well, everything seems to be working good. So anyway, if you have a scan tool like this, that's an easy way to check it out as well to see if it's working. And hopefully this video helped you guys, so give it a thumbs up if it did. I definitely appreciate that. Let me know what you found with your Honda, if this was the problem, or if you found broken components in there. And yeah, definitely appreciate any comments or support. So thanks guys, KZ Guy 2, No Nonsense, Know How.